Hi guys, tonight we're stepping through a frozen doorway into a medieval castle where the year is 1478 and the winter wind is pressing against ancient stone walls. Have you ever wondered how anyone could sleep when a fortress bedroom felt colder than the world outside it tonight? You will discover how ordinary people, servants, soldiers, and nobles survived a freezing winter night without modern heating, electricity, or comfortable beds. The castle around you is dark, quiet, and alive with small sounds from another age. So, before you settle into the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe also. Comment where you are listening from and your local time right now. Now, dim the lights, and step carefully into the cold evening air surrounding the castle. You stand before a massive medieval fortress rising above the winter landscape. The year is 1478, and the sun has disappeared behind grey clouds long before the evening meal is finished. Snow rests along the battlements, while thin streams of smoke drift from chimneys struggling against the heavy night air. The castle looks strong, but even the strongest walls cannot stop winter from finding every crack. You walk closer and hear the wind moving around the towers. It whistles through narrow openings built for defence rather than comfort. The stones beneath your feet feel cold through your shoes. The air carries the smell of damp wood, burning ash, and old stone that has absorbed centuries of storms. This is not a peaceful winter cabin with a roaring fireplace in every room. A medieval castle is a place built for protection first, comfort comes second, sometimes much later. The people living here understand that survival depends on preparation, cooperation, and making the best use of every small source of warmth. You enter through the castle gate as evening settles across the land. The wooden doors close behind you with a deep sound that echoes through the passage. A guard pulls heavy iron bars into place, and the castle begins its nightly transformation. The busy world outside disappears, leaving only the people sheltered within these walls. During the late medieval period, castles were often centres of power, administration, and military defence. They were not simply homes for wealthy families. They were also workplaces filled with cooks, servants, craftsmen, certain guards, and visitors who depended on the castle for safety. On a winter night like this, every person had a role to play. You notice that the castle is never completely silent. A medieval fortress has its own nighttime language. Footsteps move across stone floors. A door creaks somewhere above you. Firewood cracks inside a nearby hearth. A distant voice calls across a hallway before disappearing into darkness. The cold changes everything. People move closer together because warmth is valuable. Rooms are smaller than many modern people imagine, and several areas serve multiple purposes throughout the day. A hall used for meals may become a gathering place after sunset. A corner near a fireplace may become the most desirable location in the entire building. You might expect medieval nobles to live in constant luxury, but winter had a way of humbling everyone. Even wealthy families faced smoky rooms, cold floors, and uncomfortable nights. Thick clothing, heavy blankets, and carefully managed fires were necessary parts of daily life. The first thing you notice is the light. There are no bright lamps filling the castle corridors. Instead, candles and fire provide small pools of golden warmth surrounded by shadows. The flames dance against the walls, creating moving shapes that make the fortress feel almost alive. The smell of burning beeswax mixes with the scent of roasted food from the evening meal. Somewhere nearby, servants carry supplies for the night. Someone checks a fire. Someone closes a shutter. Someone prepares a sleeping area before the cold becomes even stronger. Historians still argue whether medieval people generally slept in one long nighttime period or experienced a more interrupted pattern of sleep, because written evidence from ordinary households remains limited. The truth is that sleep habits probably changed depending on wealth, occupation, season, and personal circumstances. You look around and realise that bedtime in this castle is not a single moment. It is a gradual process. The castle slowly becomes quieter as people finish their responsibilities and search for warmth. A curious detail from medieval life is that some households used herbs near sleeping areas, not only for pleasant smells but also because people believed certain plants could improve comfort and protection during the night. The medieval world mixed practical knowledge with beliefs that feel unusual today. You pass a narrow window and look outside. The landscape has disappeared beneath darkness and snow. The castle appears isolated, but inside these walls hundreds of small decisions keep people alive. A properly stored bundle of firewood matters. A well-made blanket matters. A carefully closed window shutter matters. Winter does not arrive as a single dramatic enemy. It arrives quietly, it slips under doors, settles on rooftops, and turns ordinary tasks into challenges. The people of 1478 know this rhythm well. They do not fight winter with modern inventions, they negotiate with it. You continue deeper into the castle. Following the warm glow of the main hall, the voices become louder. The smell of food becomes stronger. The evening gathering is reaching its final hours, and soon everyone will begin preparing for sleep. But before anyone lies down, there is still work to do. Fires must be watched. Rooms must be arranged, clothing must be placed nearby for the morning. The long frozen night has only begun. The castle stands against the storm. The candles burn softly. The stone walls hold the cold outside, but they also remember every winter that has passed. And tonight, you are here to discover what happens when the last flames become the only comfort between you and the frozen darkness. You step further into the castle and enter the great hall, the heart of the fortress where the final hours of the evening slowly unfold. The room is large, but the warmth inside feels precious rather than abundant. A great fireplace burns against one wall, sending orange light across wooden tables, stone columns, and the faces of people preparing for the night ahead. The first thing you notice is the sound. The hall is filled with a gentle mixture of voices, footsteps, and the occasional snap of burning logs. Someone places another piece of wood onto the fire, and sparks rise briefly before disappearing into the darkness above. The wind outside continues its endless conversation with the castle walls. You feel the difference immediately. Outside, winter is sharp and unforgiving. Inside, the great hall offers a temporary shelter from the frozen world. It is not perfectly warm. It is not quiet, it is not luxurious by modern standards, yet for the people living here, this room represents safety. The Great Hall serves many purposes in a medieval castle. During the day, it may host meals, meetings, celebrations, and important gatherings. At night, it becomes a place where people finish their duties, share stories, and prepare themselves for sleep. A castle is always changing according to the needs of its inhabitants. You look toward the long wooden tables where the remains of the evening meal are being cleared away. Servants move carefully, collecting cups, plates, and utensils. Their movements are practiced because everyone understands that winter requires organization. Wasting time or resources can make a difficult season even harder. The smell of the room is a mixture of roasted meat, warm bread, smoke, damp wool, and burning wood. It is not the clean, carefully controlled atmosphere of a modern home. Medieval life carried many smells together. People, animals, food, fires, and stone all shared the same environment. You watch as a servant shakes out a thick cloth near the fireplace. The fabric has collected the dampness of the day. Drying clothing and blankets is a constant challenge during winter because wet materials can steal body heat quickly. A simple task like keeping fabric dry becomes an important part of survival. Historians know that medieval castles often used large communal spaces like halls because heating individual rooms was difficult. A single large fire could provide warmth and light for many people at once. Although the heat was uneven and the far corners of the room remained cold, the people near the fire have the best position. Everyone understands this without needing to discuss it. The warmest places are valuable. A person who sits too far away may feel the cold returning within minutes. A person who stands close to the flames may become comfortable enough to forget the frozen air waiting outside. Almost. Because medieval fires had their own problems. Smoke could fill the room, especially when the wind pushed downward through openings in the roof. The smell of ash could cling to clothing and hair. Staying warm sometimes meant accepting a little discomfort. You notice a young servant carrying a small bundle of blankets toward a sleeping area. The blankets are heavy and rough compared with modern bedding. They are designed for warmth and durability rather than softness. Every thread represents effort, from producing the wool to preparing the finished fabric. A curious detail about medieval households is that beds and bedding were often valuable possessions. Wealthy families could own many blankets, while poorer workers might have far fewer layers available. A warm sleeping place was not simply a matter of comfort, it reflected a person's position within society. The great hall slowly becomes quieter. The important conversations are ending. Travellers who arrived before nightfall begin searching for places to rest. Guards prepare for their duties. Servants continue their final tasks before they can think about their own sleep. You notice that nobody simply says it is bedtime and walks away. A medieval castle does not work that way. Night arrives gradually, and every person follows a different routine depending on their responsibilities. A noble guest may receive a prepared chamber with additional coverings. A servant may sleep in a shared space after finishing work. A guard may never truly enter sleep because the safety of everyone depends on staying alert. The fire continues burning. The shadows grow longer. The castle settles. You sit near the edge of the hall and imagine the people around you. They are not characters from a distant story. They are workers, families, soldiers, and travellers who felt the same winter cold that you feel now. They worried about tomorrow's tasks. They searched for warmth. They hoped for a quiet night. Historians still debate how common it was for medieval households of different social levels to sleep together in shared rooms, because surviving records often focus on wealthy people rather than ordinary workers. The castle you are exploring contains many different experiences hidden behind the same stone walls. You hear a final piece of wood collapse in the fireplace. The sound echoes across the hall. Someone closes a heavy wooden shutter against the wind. Someone else pulls a cloak tighter around their shoulders. The evening is ending. The great hall, once full of movement, begins surrendering to silence soon. The people who remain awake will leave this room and find their places for the night. Some will climb narrow stairways. Some will rest near the warmth they helped create. Some will sleep in spaces that were never designed for comfort. Yet they will sleep. Because even in the coldest winters, humans have always searched for small moments of peace, a warm fire, a dry blanket, a safe roof above their heads. These simple things mattered deeply in 1478. You follow the fading light deeper into the castle, knowing that the next question is waiting. Where exactly do these people sleep when the winter night becomes its coldest? You leave the fading warmth of the great hall and follow the quiet movement of people disappearing into different parts of the castle. The evening has almost ended, but the fortress is not asleep yet. Every person must find the place where they will spend the frozen hours before morning. The stone corridor feels colder immediately. The warmth from the fire disappears behind you, replaced by the natural chill of ancient walls. Your footsteps echo softly beneath the ceiling. The air smells of cold stone, old wood, and the faint smoke drifting from distant fireplaces. You walk through the castle and begin noticing something important. There is no single sleeping arrangement. A medieval castle is not one large home where everyone enjoys the same comfort. It is a small world divided by rank, duty, and necessity. Where you sleep depends on who you are. A noble family has private chambers. Important guests may receive prepared rooms. Servants often sleep close to the areas where they work. Soldiers rest near their equipment and responsibilities. The castle does not separate people only by walls, it separates them through daily life. You pass several doorways, each one revealing a different version of winter survival. Behind one door, a noble chamber waits with curtains and heavier coverings. Behind another, workers prepare a shared sleeping space. Somewhere above, guards continue walking through the cold night. The castle feels almost like a living creature. During the day, it moves with activity. At night, it folds inward, bringing people closer together for warmth and protection. Medieval people understood that warmth was not only created by fire, it came from location, clothing, bedding, and even the presence of other people. A smaller room with several occupants could sometimes feel warmer than a larger private chamber. You enter a lower room where servants are finishing the preparations. The space is simple. Wooden benches line the walls. Bundles of cloth and personal belongings are placed carefully nearby. There are no decorations meant to impress visitors. Everything has a practical purpose. You notice the bedding. It is not arranged like a modern bedroom. There are no perfectly smooth mattresses or carefully shaped pillows. Instead, people rely on layered materials. Straw, wool, blankets, and animal coverings help create a barrier between the body and the cold. The floor is one of winter's greatest enemies. Stone absorbs cold throughout the day and releases it slowly during the night. Without protection beneath the body, the chill can become exhausting. Even a thick blanket feels less useful if the freezing ground pulls warmth away from you. You watch as someone spreads a layer beneath a sleeping place. This simple action represents generations of practical knowledge. Medieval people may not have understood heat transfer in scientific terms, but they understood what worked through experience. A warm surface, a dry covering, a protected corner. These details could make the difference between comfort and misery. The mainstream image of medieval castles often shows grand rooms filled with luxury, but historians know that many spaces inside castles were functional and crowded. The fortress was designed for defense and administration before it was designed for personal comfort. You move upward through a narrow staircase. The steps are uneven from years of use. The walls seem to hold every sound. A servant carrying supplies passes quietly, careful not to disturb those already resting. You reach another sleeping area and notice that privacy is limited. Curtains, wooden screens, and separate rooms could provide some separation. But complete privacy was rare compared with modern expectations. This might feel strange today, but medieval people lived differently. Sharing space was normal. Families, servants, and workers often experienced daily life much closer together than people do now. The idea of having a completely private bedroom for every person would have seemed unusual to many people in the 15th century. A curious detail is that some medieval beds were placed high enough that storage space existed underneath. This allowed people to keep belongings safe while also making better use of limited room. In a castle, every corner mattered. You continue walking until you find a small chamber prepared for the night. The fire has burned low. A candle flickers beside the wall. The room is not warm, but it feels protected. You place your hand against the wall. Cold. The stone remembers the winter outside. Historians still argue whether castle interiors were consistently colder than modern assumptions suggest, because surviving evidence varies greatly between regions. Building designs and available heating systems. Some castles were surprisingly well adapted to cold weather, while others offered only basic protection. The truth is somewhere between comfort and hardship. These people were not constantly suffering every moment of winter. They had skills, traditions, and methods developed over generations. They knew how to arrange rooms, manage fires, prepare clothing, and create sleeping spaces that allowed them to endure difficult nights. You return your attention to the castle around you. Somewhere nearby, a child is being covered with extra blankets somewhere else. A guard checks the hallway. A noble family prepares for rest behind a wooden door. Everyone is moving towards sleep, but everyone reaches it differently. The frozen night outside continues. Snow gathers on the rooftops, wind moves around the towers. The castle remains awake for a little longer, holding hundreds of lives within its walls. You now understand that sleeping in a medieval castle was not simply about lying down at the end of the day. It was about finding warmth, safety, and a small place in a world where winter could never be ignored. And deeper inside the fortress, another sleeping space awaits. A chamber belonging to those who had power, wealth, and yet still had to face the same cold night. You climb the narrow staircase toward the upper levels of the castle, where the air becomes quieter and the sounds of the great hall fade into distant memories. The stone steps are cold beneath your feet, and the walls seem to hold the winter darkness around you, somewhere below. Servants continue their final tasks, but here the castle feels calmer. You arrive near the private chambers of the noble household. These rooms belong to the people who own the castle, manage its lands, and command the attention of everyone living inside the walls. Yet even here, behind thick doors and carved wooden panels, winter remains a constant visitor. The first thing you notice is the smell. The chamber carries the scent of burning wood, beeswax candles, dried herbs, and wool fabric. Compared with the crowded areas below, the room feels more controlled. There are fewer voices, there are fewer footsteps. The silence itself feels like a kind of luxury. You look around and see that comfort in 1478 does not look exactly like comfort today. The room is not filled with endless warmth. The walls are still stone, the floor is still cold, the fire still needs attention. Wealth could improve winter life, but it could not completely defeat the season. A noble chamber usually contained a few important features. There was a bed, storage for clothing and valuables, seating, and often a fireplace or another source of heat. Heavy fabrics helped reduce drafts, and wooden shutters protected openings from the worst of the weather. You approach the bed. It immediately appears different from the sleeping spaces used by servants. It is larger, raised from the floor, and surrounded by materials showing wealth and status. Curtains may hang around it, creating a small protected area that helps block cold air and provides privacy. The medieval bed was more than a place to sleep. It represented social position. A wealthy household might invest significant resources into bedding because textiles were expensive and valuable. A richly prepared bed displayed prosperity as clearly as clothing or jewellery. Still, you would probably find the bed less comfortable than expected. The mattress would not feel like a modern soft surface. Materials such as straw, wool, feathers, or combinations of different fillings were used depending on wealth and availability. Maintenance was important because natural materials could absorb moisture and require regular attention. You sit near the edge and imagine the night routine of the castle lord or lady. Before sleeping, clothing is removed carefully and placed nearby. Personal items are secured, prayers may be offered, conversations may continue quietly before the final candle is extinguished. Nighttime in a noble chamber is not completely private. The medieval household is closely connected. Servants may enter to adjust fires, bring messages, or assist with preparations. Even the most powerful people in the castle depend on others for daily comfort. This creates an interesting contrast. A person with great wealth still relies on a servant carrying firewood. A person with authority still needs someone to prepare warm coverings. A person living in the highest chamber still feels the winter wind against the walls. You look toward the fireplace. The flames create movement across the room, but the warmth does not reach every corner. Fireplaces in medieval buildings could make rooms more comfortable, yet heating large stone spaces remain challenging. The fire requires constant care. Logs must be selected, carried, stored, and added at the right time. A neglected fire can shrink quickly during the night, leaving the room colder by morning. A curious detail from medieval life is that some wealthy households used special fabrics and decorative bed hangings, not only for appearance but also because layers of material helped create warmer sleeping environments. Beauty and practicality often work together. You hear the wind outside. It presses against the shutters. The castle answers with small sounds. A wooden beam shifts. A flame moves. A distant door closes. These noises would have been normal companions during sleep. Complete silence belonged more to empty buildings than living castles. Historians still debate how much warmth noble chambers actually provided during winter, because surviving descriptions often focus on wealth and decoration rather than exact temperatures. The presence of fireplaces and textiles suggests attempts at comfort, but the true experience depended heavily on the building itself. You pull the heavy covering closer and imagine the final moments before sleep. The candle burns lower. The room becomes darker. The responsibilities of the day begin to disappear. Outside, snow covers the fields around the castle. Farmers, travellers, and animals endure the same winter night under different conditions. Inside, the noble chamber offers protection, but not complete separation from nature. The frozen season remains powerful. The person sleeping here may own the land beyond the walls. They may command soldiers and servants. They may make decisions affecting hundreds of lives. But when night arrives, they share one simple human experience with everyone else. They seek warmth. They seek rest. They hope morning arrives gently. You leave the noble chamber behind and continue through the castle corridors. Another sleeping world waits nearby, where the greatest challenge is not maintaining status, but simply staying warm until sunrise. You leave the noble chamber and continue deeper into the castle, following the quiet path toward the places where sleep itself becomes the main challenge. The candles behind you become smaller points of light, and the cold seems to return with every step. Tonight, the most important object in the castle may not be the throne, the armour, or the weapons hanging on the walls. It may be the bed. A medieval person could survive a cold night because of many things working together. But a sleeping place was one of the most important protections against winter. When the body rests for hours, it cannot create the same warmth through movement and activity. The bed must become a small shelter within the larger shelter of the castle. You enter a room where sleeping arrangements are being prepared. The first thing you notice is the texture of everything around you. Wool blankets feel heavy and rough beneath your fingers. Wooden frames feel solid and unfinished. The materials are practical, built for use rather than appearance. The bed in 1478 is very different from the soft, carefully designed beds familiar today. It is usually made from a wooden structure supporting layers of natural materials. The mattress may contain straw, wool, feathers, or other fillings depending on wealth and availability. The purpose is simple: keep the cold away. You look beneath the sleeping area and notice the distance between the person and the floor. Raising the bed was important because stone floors collected the cold of winter. A body lying directly on the ground would lose warmth quickly. Medieval people understood this through experience. They did not describe heat loss using modern scientific language, but they knew that elevation, insulation, and layers mattered. A small difference could change the entire night. A thicker blanket, a drier mattress, a better position away from drafts. These were not minor details. They shaped up survival. You watch as someone adds another covering to the bed. The blanket falls slowly, creating a heavier layer that traps warmth. The person preparing it understands that winter sleep is a careful balance. Too little covering brings cold. Too much covering can become uncomfortable. The medieval world was filled with practical solutions created through observation. People learned what worked because they had to. The smell of the bedding tells a story. You notice wool, dried plants, smoke from nearby fires, and the faint scent of the materials used to preserve and protect fabrics. Nothing here is artificial. Every object comes from the landscape around the castle. Wool comes from animals. Wood comes from forests. Straw comes from fields. The sleeping space connects the castle to the entire medieval economy. A mainstream historical fact is that wool was one of the most important materials in medieval Europe because it provided clothing, blankets, and many household textiles. The ability to produce and maintain wool products was essential for surviving colder seasons. You sit beside the bed and imagine a person lying down after a long day. Their body is tired from work, travel, or responsibility. Their hands have touched cold tools, rough fabrics, and frozen surfaces. Now they search for the small comfort of a protected place. Sleep does not arrive instantly. The room must settle first. The fire must calm. The sounds outside must become familiar. The body must adjust to the temperature. You hear the wind moving around the castle towers. The sound is steady, almost like a natural lullaby for medieval people. Storms were not background noise from another world. They were reminders of the environment surrounding them. A curious detail is that some medieval sleeping spaces used herbs placed near bedding because people valued pleasant scents and believed certain plants offered protection or comfort. These practices combined household tradition, practical knowledge, and beliefs about the unseen world. You move toward another sleeping area and notice that beds also revealed social differences. A wealthy person might have a larger frame, better fabrics, and more layers available. A worker might rely on simpler materials and shared arrangements. The difference between comfort and discomfort could be surprisingly small. One extra blanket could matter. A warmer location could matter. A protected corner could matter. Historians still debate how widespread certain bedding materials were among ordinary medieval people, because written records often describe wealthy households more clearly than everyday workers. Archaeological evidence helps researchers understand possibilities, but many details remain uncertain. The truth is that medieval sleep existed across a wide range of experiences. Some people rested in carefully prepared chambers. Others slept in simple spaces after exhausting work. Yet all of them faced the same winter darkness. You notice that the bed represents more than a place to sleep. It represents human creativity. Long before modern heating systems and insulated buildings, people found ways to create comfort from limited resources. They studied their surroundings. They adapted. They shared knowledge. The castle around you may appear cold and harsh, but inside every sleeping area are countless small decisions designed to make life possible. You pull the blanket closer for a moment and feel the weight of centuries resting in the room. The people who slept here are gone, but their methods remain understandable. They searched for warmth just as people do today. The night continues. The snow continues falling. The castle settles deeper into darkness, and while the beds are prepared throughout the fortress, another question remains. How did people create warmth when the stone walls themselves seem determined to hold on to the cold? You leave the sleeping chambers behind and follow the faint glow coming from another part of the castle. The light grows stronger as you approach the source. Before you see it, you feel it. Warmth. The great fireplace ahead is still alive, sending gentle waves of heat into the room. The flames move slowly, turning pieces of wood into glowing embers. The sound is familiar and comforting. Crackling fire has been part of human evenings for thousands of years, and tonight it remains the center of survival inside this frozen fortress. You stand near the hearth and notice how carefully everyone treats it. Fire is not decoration. Fire is a responsibility. It must be protected, maintained, and used wisely throughout the night. A castle fire represents comfort, but it also represents work. Someone must collect the wood. Someone must carry it inside. Someone must place it correctly. Someone must watch it while others sleep. The people of 1478 understand that a fire is a living thing. Ignore it, and warmth disappears. You look at the logs stacked nearby. They are not simply pieces of wood waiting to be burned. They represent months of preparation. Before winter arrives, households must gather and store enough fuel to survive the cold season. A mainstream historical fact is that medieval castles and households relied heavily on wood as a primary fuel source for heating and cooking. Managing forests and fuel supplies was an important part of medieval estate life. The castle cannot simply walk outside and find endless warmth waiting in the snow. Every log matters. Every flame matters. You move closer to the fireplace and feel the difference between the side facing the flames and the side exposed to the room, the warmth is uneven. Medieval heating was not like modern systems that spread a comfortable temperature throughout an entire building. The fire creates islands of warmth surrounded by colder spaces. A person standing close may feel comfortable. A person several steps away may still need thick clothing. This is why people gathered near fires whenever possible, especially during winter evenings. The room smells of smoke and burning wood. The scent settles into clothing, hair and blankets. After spending a night near a medieval hearth, a person would likely carry the smell of fire with them the next morning. You might think this would be unpleasant, but in the medieval world, the smell of smoke also meant safety. It meant warmth. It meant survival. You watch a servant carefully adjust to the fire. The person knows exactly when to add another piece of wood. Too much fuel could waste resources. Too little could leave the room freezing before morning. Winter requires patience. Winter requires attention. The castle sleeps only because some people remain awake. You notice the roof above the hearth and imagine the challenges of managing smoke. Medieval builders developed different methods for ventilation. But large fires inside stone buildings could still create smoky conditions. The warmth came with a cost. The smoke could sting the eyes. Ash could settle on surfaces. Clothing could absorb the scent. Yet these inconveniences were accepted because the alternative was far worse. A cold room. A frozen night. No protection. A curious detail from medieval life is that some castle fireplaces were designed on a very large scale, sometimes becoming architectural features of their own. They were not only heating devices, but also symbols of status and power. The size of a fireplace could show the importance of a household. You look into the flames and think about all the people who depended on them. A noble family might gather nearby. Servants might prepare rooms beside the warmth. Soldiers might briefly escape the freezing air after their duties. The fire connects everyone. Even people with different positions in society share the same need for heat. Historians still debate how effective medieval fireplaces were at warming entire castle rooms because building designs varied greatly across regions and centuries. Some castles likely managed heat better than popular imagination suggests, while others remained extremely cold despite large fires. The truth depends on the castle itself, the weather, the materials, the people maintaining the fire. You listen. As the flames continue their quiet rhythm, outside, the winter storm presses against the walls. Inside, this small circle of warmth holds back the darkness. The castle is not defeating winter, it is negotiating with it. Every night follows the same careful pattern. The fire burns, the wood disappears, the people adjust, the cold waits. You step away from the hearth and feel the temperature change immediately. The warmth fades quickly behind you. This simple moment reveals something important about medieval life. Comfort was often temporary. It had to be created again and again. The people of 1478 did not expect winter to become easy. They learned how to live alongside difficulty. They built routines around the cold. They prepared sleeping places, protected fires, and shared warmth whenever possible. The night grows deeper. The castle becomes quieter, but the fire continues burning. Somewhere nearby, a servant is still awake because this flame must survive until morning. Their work is invisible to many people resting safely inside the castle, but without it, the frozen night would feel much harsher. You follow the sound of footsteps moving away from the hearth. The servants are beginning their final tasks. Before they can sleep, they must make sure everyone else can. You follow the quiet footsteps leaving the warmth of the fireplace and enter the working areas of the castle. The great hall has nearly emptied. The nobles have disappeared into their private chambers. The guests have found places to rest, and the sounds of conversation have faded into whispers. But the castle is not finished for the night. The servants are still awake. They move through the corridors, carrying out the final tasks that allow everyone else to sleep peacefully. Their work is rarely remembered in grand stories about medieval castles. Yet they are the people who keep the fortress alive after the candles become shorter and the winter darkness becomes deeper. You watch as a servant carries a small bucket toward a room where a fire has begun to weaken. The metal handle feels cold against their hand. The hallway air is sharp, and every breath creates a faint cloud in the dim light. The first thing you notice is the sound of movement. There is no dramatic noise, only quiet work. Soft footsteps, the opening of wooden doors, the movement of fabric, the gentle scrape of tools being placed away. Night in a medieval castle is not a complete ending to the day. It is a different kind of activity. Servants check sleeping areas, they prepare coverings, they remove items that should not remain near fires. They make sure important rooms are secure. Their routines are built from experience and necessity. You enter a smaller chamber where blankets are being arranged. The room belongs to people who work inside the castle rather than those who command it. The space is simpler, but the same concerns remain. Stay warm, stay dry, stay safe. You notice the clothing hanging nearby. Wool garments, cloaks, and practical layers are essential during winter. Medieval people did not have the option of turning up a heater when the temperature dropped. Their clothing was part of their personal protection system. A mainstream historical fact is that wool was widely valued in medieval Europe because it provided warmth even when conditions were damp. This made it especially useful in colder climates where staying dry and insulated was difficult. You see a servant folding fabric carefully. It may seem like an ordinary task, but proper storage matters. Damp materials can become uncomfortable and less useful. Winter requires constant attention to small details. A dry blanket tonight means better sleep. A better sleeping place means more strength tomorrow. You move deeper into the servant areas and notice that these rooms feel different from the noble chambers above. They are more crowded, more practical, less focused on privacy. Several people may share sleeping spaces because room inside a castle is valuable. The same walls that protect everyone from outside threats also limit how much personal space exists inside. You hear quiet conversations between workers finishing their duties. They speak softly because others are already resting nearby. These small moments are part of castle life that are rarely recorded. History often remembers kings, battles, and important decisions. But history also happens in quiet rooms. It happens when someone carries firewood through a dark hallway. It happens when someone repairs a blanket before winter becomes worse. It happens when someone stays awake so another person can sleep. You pause beside the doorway and watch the servants prepare for their own rest. Their day has been long. They have cooked meals, cleaned rooms, carried supplies, and maintained the routines of the household. Now they finally search for sleep. But their sleeping place may not be ideal. They may rest near other workers. They may sleep close to where they are needed. They may not have the thickest blankets or the largest rooms. Yet they know how to make the most of what they have. A curious detail from medieval households is that servants sometimes slept close to their places of work because quick access was important. A person responsible for fires, animals, or household needs might remain nearby even during the night. Their work followed them into darkness. You walk toward a small window and look outside. The storm has grown stronger. Snow moves across the courtyard, and the castle walls disappear into the darkness. The servants inside are protected, but they are also connected to the cold world outside. Historians still debate how much written evidence represents the daily experiences of ordinary medieval workers, because records from the period often focus on nobles, religious institutions, and major events rather than the private routines of servants. Their stories survive mostly through scattered clues, the objects they used, the buildings they maintained, the traditions passed through generations. You return your attention to the room. A final candle burns near the wall. Someone pulls a blanket higher. Someone places their shoes nearby for the morning. The castle isn't almost asleep. The servants have finished their responsibilities. The fires are prepared. The doors are secured. The rooms are ready. For a brief moment, everyone inside the fortress shares the same hope. A quiet night. A safe night. A warm enough night. You leave the servants behind and continue toward another part of the castle, where sleep is impossible for a different group of people. While most of the fortress rests, some must remain awake. The soldiers are beginning their winter watch. You leave the quieter servant areas and make your way toward the outer walls of the castle. The warmth of the inner rooms slowly disappears behind you. The air becomes sharper. The stone beneath your feet feels colder. Every step takes you closer to the place where sleep is impossible. The guards are awake, while many people inside the fortress are searching for comfort beneath blankets and near fading fires. Soldiers stand watch against the winter darkness. Their night is different. They do not listen to the storm from a protected chamber. They face it directly. You climb a narrow staircase leading toward the battlements. The wind reaches you first. It moves across the walls with a steady force, pushing against your clothing and finding every small opening. You pull your cloak tighter. The cold does not ask permission. The guard beside you understands this well. He has spent many nights like this. The first thing you notice is the sound. The castle is quieter from above, but the silence is never complete. Wind moves around the towers. Boots strike against stone. Metal equipment shifts with every movement. Somewhere below, a door closes against the storm. A medieval castle depends on people who remain awake. A strong wall is useful. A locked gate is useful. But someone must still watch. During the 15th century, castles were often less focused on constant warfare than earlier medieval fortresses, but security remained an important responsibility. Guards protected entrances, monitored activity, and maintained awareness of possible dangers. Tonight, their greatest enemy is not an attacking army. It is winter. You look at the soldiers' clothing. It is practical rather than comfortable. Layers help protect the body, but standing still in freezing air is one of the hardest conditions to endure. Movement creates warmth. Waiting creates cold. The guard walks slowly along the wall because even small movements help maintain body heat. The routine is familiar. Walk, observe, listen, repeat. You stand beside him and look across the dark landscape. Snow covers fields, roads, and distant villages. The world outside the castle feels almost empty, yet the soldier knows it is not empty. People travel, animals move, weather changes. The night must be watched. A mainstream historical fact is that medieval guards often followed organised watch routines, with different people taking responsibility during different periods of the night. This allowed a castle to maintain security without forcing the same person to remain awake until morning. You imagine the relief of hearing another guard approach. A moment to rest. A moment to step away from the cold. A moment to return and see it inside. But before that moment arrives, duty continues. You notice small details around the battlement. The stone surface is covered with frost. The wooden structures feel damp. The air carries the smell of cold rain. Snow and smoke drifting upward from the castle below. The warmth from the fires feels impossibly far away. A curious detail from medieval military life is that guards were not always standing in complete isolation. They often worked together, shared responsibilities, and relied on communication because awareness was more valuable than individual strength. A castle was protected by cooperation, not only walls, not only weapons, people. You look down toward the inner courtyard. Small points of candlelight move below. From this height, the castle seems like a collection of tiny, warm spaces surrounded by endless darkness. The contrast is striking. Inside, people sleep. Outside, someone stays awake so they can continue sleeping. You feel the weight of that responsibility. Historians still debate how harsh nighttime castle conditions were for soldiers, because accounts vary widely between regions, seasons, and individual circumstances. Some guards may have had access to sheltered positions, while others likely experienced much more exposure to the elements. The exact experience changes from castle to castle, but the challenge remains easy to understand. Cold air, long hours, limited comfort. You hear the guard speaking quietly to another soldier. Their conversation is simple. They discuss the weather. They mention the fire below. They exchange small observations that help the night pass more quickly. Humans have always found ways to make difficult moments easier. A conversation, a shared task, a familiar routine. The storm continues outside the walls, but the guards continue their watch. Eventually the hour will change. Another person will take their place. Another pair of eyes will watch the darkness. And perhaps, after many hours awake, these soldiers will finally find a place to rest while others take over their duty. You leave the battlements and descend toward the warmer parts of the castle. The sound of the wind becomes softer with every step. The guard remains behind. The firelight returns. The smell of food and smoke grows stronger. The castle has many sleeping spaces, but it also has many people who make sleep possible. As you move toward the lower rooms again, another part of the fortress begins to reveal itself. The kitchen. Even after the evening meal has ended, it remains one of the most important places during a winter night. You descend from the cold battlements and return toward the lower levels of the castle. The difference is immediate. The sharp wind disappears behind thick stone walls, and the sound of your footsteps becomes softer against the floor. Ahead, a faint orange glow appears. The kitchen is still awake. While many people in the castle have already settled into their sleeping places, the kitchen remains a place of movement. It is not only where meals are created, it is also a source of warmth, preparation, and late evening activity. You enter carefully and feel the change in the atmosphere. The air is warmer here, carrying the smell of roasted food, smoke, herbs, and freshly baked bread. The room feels alive even though the rest of the castle is slowly becoming quiet. The first thing you notice is the sound. Pots are being moved. Wood shifts in the fire. Someone speaks softly while finishing a final task. The kitchen has its own rhythm, slower than during the busy hours of the day, but still active. Medieval kitchens were essential parts of castle life. They provided food for everyone from the lord of the castle to the workers who maintained it. A large household required careful planning because feeding many people depended on supplies collected, stored, and prepared throughout the year. You look around at the shelves and storage areas. Winter changes the way people think about food. Fresh ingredients become more limited, and preserved supplies become increasingly important. Salted foods, dried ingredients, stored grains. These become valuable resources during the colder months. You watch a cook checking containers and organizing supplies for the morning. The task appears simple, but preparation is one of the reasons the castle can function through winter. A forgotten item, a damaged supply, a poorly managed storage area, any of these could create problems. Winter rewards careful planning. You move closer to the fireplace in the kitchen. It is larger and more active than many smaller household fires. The heat feels stronger here because the room is designed around cooking. For a moment, you understand why people might prefer spending time near this area. Warmth, light, company. The kitchen is not just a workplace. It is a gathering point. You notice workers briefly warming their hands near the fire before returning to their duties. Their clothing carries the smell of smoke because the kitchen fire leaves its mark on everyone who spends time nearby. A mainstream historical fact is that medieval kitchens often operated separately from living spaces because of the dangers of fire, smoke, and heat in many castles. Cooking areas were placed carefully to reduce risks while still serving the needs of the household. You look toward the doorway leading back into the castle. Even from here, the cold seems to wait. The kitchen becomes a small refuge, not a bedroom, not a place for permanent comfort, but a place where warmth exists. A curious detail about medieval kitchens is that some cooks and workers developed detailed knowledge of seasonal ingredients and preservation methods because survival depended on using available resources efficiently. Their skills shaped the daily rhythm of the entire household. You imagine someone finishing their work late at night. Their hands are tired, their clothing smells of fire and food. They know they must wake early again tomorrow. Yet before leaving, they may enjoy one final moment near the flames. the simple pleasure of warmth. You sit quietly near the edge of the room and listen. The fire creates a steady sound that almost feels like a lullaby. Outside, the storm continues. Inside, the kitchen holds its small circle of comfort. Historians still debate how much access different groups had to kitchen warmth after working hours, because surviving records often describe household organisation without explaining the everyday experiences of workers in detail. Some servants may have spent more time near warm areas, while others likely had limited opportunities. The reality depended on the household. The castle is not one experience, it is hundreds. You watch as the final preparations end. The remaining food is stored away, the tools are cleaned, the fire is adjusted for the night. The kitchen slowly changes. It is no longer a place of activity. It becomes a place of waiting. The flames continue burning, but lower now. The people who worked here begin searching for their own sleeping places. You notice something important as they leave. The kitchen has supported the entire castle. But the people working inside it also need care. Their bodies feel the same cold. Their exhaustion is the same. Their desire for rest is the same. Winter does not care about rank. It reaches every room. You leave the kitchen and follow the last sounds of movement through the corridors. The castle is almost completely quiet now. The great hall is dark. The servants are resting. The nobles have disappeared behind closed doors. The guards continue their watch. Only the small noises of the night remain. A wooden beam. A distant footstep. The wind outside. The castle has entered its deepest hours, and now, with nearly everyone asleep, you begin to hear the strange and unexpected sounds that fill a medieval fortress after midnight. You move quietly through the castle as the final traces of evening disappear. The great hall is now dark. The kitchen fire has lowered, and most of the people inside the fortress have finally reached their sleeping places. This is the moment when the castle reveals another side of itself. The nighttime castle is not silent. It breathes. You stand in the corridor and listen carefully. At first, you hear almost nothing. Then small sounds begin appearing from every direction. A wooden beam shifts above you. A door moves slightly in its frame. The wind presses against the shutters. The castle speaks in whispers. The first thing you notice is how different familiar sounds become in darkness. During the day, footsteps and voices blend into ordinary activity. At night, every small noise feels important. A single movement can travel through the stone halls. A single creaking board can wake someone. You walk slowly along the passage and feel the cold air moving around you. The walls that protected the castle during the day now hold the sounds of everyone resting inside. The atmosphere is calm, but it is never completely still. Medieval people lived with these sounds every night. They knew their homes. They understood which noises were normal and which ones required attention. A servant might recognize the difference between ordinary wood movement and someone walking through a restricted area. A guard might notice a change in the pattern of sounds outside the walls. Experience created awareness. You pass a narrow window and hear the storm outside. The wind moves across the courtyard, creating a low, constant sound. Snow touches the stone surfaces with a soft movement almost impossible to notice unless you are listening carefully. The smell of the corridor is different at night. The scents from cooking have faded, leaving behind cold stone, smoke from earlier fires, and the natural smell of old wood. You place your hand against the wall. The surface is freezing. The castle stores the cold. This is one reason medieval people depended so much on clothing, bedding, and fire. Stone buildings provided protection from weather, but they did not automatically create warmth. You continue walking and hear a faint sound from a nearby room. Someone turns in their sleep. A blanket moves. The room becomes quiet again. Sleep in a medieval castle was surrounded by activity. People did not disappear from the world when they closed their eyes. The building continued around them. A mainstream historical fact is that medieval buildings often had complex layouts with thick walls, multiple rooms, and areas designed for different functions. These structures created unique sound patterns where activity in one area could often be heard elsewhere. You imagine someone lying awake for a moment, listening to the same noises you hear now. Perhaps they are wondering about tomorrow's work. Perhaps they are simply waiting for their body to become comfortable in the cold room. Sleep has always required adjustment. Even in the modern world, people notice unfamiliar sounds in a new place. For medieval people, the sounds of the castle were part of their nightly environment. You enter another passage and notice small signs of life. A candle has almost burned out. A cloak hangs near a doorway. A pair of shoes rests beside a sleeping area. The objects seem ordinary, but they tell stories. Someone was here. Someone will wake here. Someone prepared for another winter morning. A curious detail from medieval life is that people sometimes use bells or specific signals to organize activities because timekeeping methods were less precise than modern clocks. In castles and religious communities, sounds often helped people understand when certain duties should begin or end. The night itself had a schedule. You hear a distant bell from somewhere within the fortress. The sound travels slowly through the stone. It does not break the peaceful atmosphere. Instead, it becomes another part of the castle's nighttime language. Historians still debate how medieval people experienced darkness emotionally, because written sources often describe religious ideas and practical concerns more than personal feelings. Some may have found the night frightening, while others likely viewed it as a familiar and peaceful period. The darkness was not empty, it was known. You return toward the central areas of the castle and notice how the temperature changes from room to room. Near a fireplace, there is slight comfort. In unused spaces, the cold returns quickly. The castle is a collection of different climates: warm corners, cold corridors, quiet chambers, busy rooms. Every person learns where to. You imagine waking suddenly during the night. The experience would be very different from waking in a modern home. There would be no electric light waiting nearby, no quick adjustment of temperature, no simple way to remove every discomfort. Instead, you would listen. You would feel. You would recognize the world around you. The darkness would slowly become familiar again. The wind continues outside. The fires continue burning. The people continue sleeping. You stand in the center of the quiet castle and realize that the night is not a pause in medieval life. It is another part of the daily rhythm. Even while resting, people remain connected to their environment. The stone walls, the weather, the sounds, the warmth. All of these shape the experience of sleep. You continue deeper into the fortress, where another unusual part of medieval nighttime life waits. Because in a castle, people were not always the only living creatures sharing the darkness. You continue through the sleeping castle, moving away from the quiet corridors and toward areas where another kind of nighttime companion can be found. The darkness feels deeper here, but the atmosphere is not empty. The medieval castle was never only a place for humans. Animals were part of everyday life. They worked. They provided resources. They helped people survive. And during the coldest nights of winter, their presence could sometimes bring unexpected comfort. You enter a lower section of the castle where storage areas and working spaces are located. The air changes immediately. You smell hay, wood, leather, and the earthy scents of animals that have shared this environment for generations. The first thing you notice is the sound. A quiet movement, a soft breath, the occasional rustle of straw. These sounds blend naturally with the castle's nighttime rhythm. Modern people often imagine medieval castles as completely separate from animals, with humans living above and animals hidden somewhere far away. The reality was more complicated. Medieval life depended heavily on animals, and they were often close to human activity. Horses carried people and supplies. Dogs helped with protection. Livestock provided food and materials. Animals were part of the household economy. You walk near a stable area and feel the difference in warmth. Compared with the exposed stone corridors, this space feels slightly more comfortable. Hay provides insulation, and living bodies naturally produce heat. People understood this. They understood where warmth could be found. A mainstream historical fact is that medieval households often kept animals in carefully managed spaces because they were essential for transportation, agriculture, food production, and daily work. Their care was a major responsibility throughout the year. You watch someone checking the animals before resting. Even at night, they must ensure everything is secure. Winter creates additional challenges because animals also need protection from cold temperatures and limited resources. The person moves slowly, not wanting to disturb the peaceful atmosphere. The castle is asleep, but life continues. You notice the practical connection between humans and animals. In a world without modern machines, animals provided strength and support that people depended on every day. A horse was not simply transportation. A sheep was not simply a source of wool. A dog was not simply a pet. Each animal had a role. You move closer to the warmest part of the area and imagine how tempting it might have been during an especially harsh winter night. A person working late might appreciate the relative warmth found near animals more than the cold stone rooms elsewhere. This does not mean people lived exactly like animals or always shared the same spaces. Medieval buildings varied greatly, and different castles had different arrangements, but the boundaries between human life and animal life were often closer than they are today. A curious detail from medieval households is that some people used animal products such as wool, hides, and feathers to create warmer sleeping materials. Everyday comfort depended on the natural world surrounding them. The bed upstairs, the blanket across the body, the clothing worn during the day. All of these came from connections with animals. You pause and listen. The sounds are gentle. The storm outside feels distant. The castle seems almost calmer here. There is something peaceful about this hidden corner of medieval life. While grand halls and noble chambers receive most attention, these practical spaces often reveal how people actually survived. Historians still debate how frequently ordinary castle residents had direct access to animal areas during daily life, because evidence differs between regions and building types. Some arrangements placed animals close to human spaces, while others separated them more carefully. The exact details changed. The relationship remained important. You leave the stable area and return to the main corridors. The castle feels different now. You begin noticing connections everywhere. The wool blanket came from animals. The leather shoes came from animals. The stored food depended on animals. The warmth of certain spaces was influenced by animals. Winter survival was never achieved by one invention. It was a collection of small solutions working together. You walk past sleeping areas and imagine the people resting inside. They are surrounded by the products of their environment. Their world is built from stone, wood, plants, and animals. Nothing's wasted. Everything has a purpose. The medieval castle may seem distant from the modern world, but the challenges are familiar. Humans still search for shelter. Humans still depend on resources around them. Humans still create comfort from what is available. The difference is the tools, the methods, the expectations. You reach another quiet hallway and look toward the rooms where families sleep. The storm continues outside, but inside, generations are resting together. Children, parents, workers. They all experience the same winter night differently. And now you're about to step into one of the most personal parts of castle life, the sleeping world of children. Because for a child inside a frozen medieval fortress, winter nights carried their own mixture of comfort, curiosity, and uncertainty. You move quietly toward the family rooms of the castle, where the sounds of work have finally faded and the softer rhythms of nighttime life begin. The corridors feel calmer now. The fires have lowered. The candles have become small glowing points against the darkness. Inside one room, children are preparing for sleep. Their experience of a winter night in 1478 is different from that of soldiers, servants, or nobles, but they share the same challenge. The cold does not care about age. Every person inside the castle must find warmth before the night becomes its deepest. You enter the room carefully and notice the atmosphere immediately. The first thing you sense is the quiet. There are fewer movements here, fewer responsibilities, and a different kind of energy. The smell is familiar. Wool blankets, wood smoke, clean fabric, the faint scent of herbs placed nearby. The room feels protected, but winter is still present. You look at the sleeping area here, prepared for the children. Depending on the household, children may sleep with family members or in shared arrangements with others. Medieval ideas about childhood were different from modern expectations, and family life often involved closer physical arrangements. A child growing up inside a castle would learn the rhythms of the building very early. The sound of the gates closing, the movement of servants, the changing seasons, the importance of fires, the feeling of cold stone beneath small hands. The castle itself would become familiar. You imagine a child lying beneath layers of blankets, listening to the storm outside. The wind moves around the towers, but the walls create a sense of protection. Even though the night is cold, there is comfort in knowing that the household is nearby. A mainstream historical fact is that medieval children often lived within the same working environment as adults, learning daily tasks and social expectations from an early age. Childhood was not separate from household responsibilities in the same way it often is today. You notice a small wooden object near the sleeping area. Perhaps it is a simple toy, a personal item, or something used during daily life. Many ordinary objects from medieval childhood have disappeared because they were made from materials that rarely survived centuries. Yet children were still children. They played. They imagined. They created small moments of happiness. You look around the room and realize that warmth was not only physical, it also came from people being close together. A parent nearby, a sibling sharing the same space, a familiar voice in the darkness. Before modern heating, companionship itself was part of survival. You hear a child asking a quiet question before sleep, perhaps about the storm, perhaps about tomorrow, perhaps about some small mystery only a child would notice. The parent answers softly. The conversation fades. The room becomes calm again. You think about how different the night sky would appear from this castle. Without modern city lights, darkness would have been much deeper. The stars would have been brighter. The world outside the walls would have felt larger and more mysterious. A curious detail from medieval life is that children often learned stories, beliefs, and traditions through spoken conversations at home because storytelling was an important way of passing knowledge between generations. A winter night was not only a time for rest, it was a time for memory. You imagine stories being told near the fire earlier in the evening, tales of ancestors, heroes, distant lands, and strange creatures. These stories helped fill the darkness before sleep. Historians still debate how much everyday childhood experience can be reconstructed from medieval sources, because many surviving records focus on elite, families, and adult concerns rather than children's private lives. Much of childhood history must be discovered through small clues. Objects, buildings, family records, article. You look again at the sleeping children. Their world is smaller than the world outside the castle, but it is not empty. They are surrounded by routines that shape their understanding of safety. The castle wakes and sleeps with them. The morning bells, the evening fires, the changing weather. All of these become part of their memories. You notice how carefully the sleeping space has been arranged. The blankets are layered. The clothing is placed nearby. The room is organized around practicality. Winter teaches preparation. Even children understand this. Before sleep, everything must be ready. Tomorrow's clothing. Tomorrow's tasks. Tomorrow's challenges. The storm outside continues, but the room remains peaceful. The walls block much of the wind. The blankets hold warmth. The presence of family creates comfort that no object can fully provide. You step away quietly and leave the children resting. The castle has many different sleeping worlds. The noble chamber, the servant room, the guard tower, the kitchen, the animal spaces. Now you have seen another one. The place where the next generation sleeps. As you walk back through the corridors, you notice something deeper about medieval winter nights. Sleep was never just an individual experience. It was connected to everyone around you. Someone maintained the fire. Someone secured the doors. Someone prepared the blankets. Someone watched the walls. Everyone contributed to the quiet moment when the castle finally rested. Your journey through the frozen fortress continues, and another place awaits. A place where sleep was not only about survival, but also about devotion, discipline, and the meaning people gave to the night. You continue through the castle as the night grows deeper, leaving the family rooms behind and moving toward a quieter part of medieval life. The sounds become softer here. The footsteps are slower. The voices are fewer. The atmosphere feels more reflective. You enter a small chamber where religious influence can be felt. In medieval Europe, ideas about sleep were shaped not only by comfort and survival, but also by beliefs about discipline, prayer, and the relationship between the body and the spirit. The room is simple. The walls are plain. The light is gentle. The cold remains. For many religious communities and individuals connected to faith, nighttime was not simply a period of rest. It could also be a time for reflection and devotion. You notice the difference immediately. There are fewer signs of luxury. The focus is not on decoration or status. Instead, the room suggests order and purpose. The first thing you hear is silence, not empty silence, a meaningful silence. The kind of silence created when people have followed the same routines for generations. You feel the cold air moving through the room. The cell is different from the great hall and kitchen. There is less smoke, less food, and more of the simple sense of stone, wood, and candle wax. Sleep here has a different character. A mainstream historical fact is that monasteries and religious community followed structured daily schedules that included prayer, work, meals, and periods of rest. These routines influenced wider medieval ideas about time and daily life. You look at the sleeping arrangements and notice their simplicity. Religious traditions often valued restraint, and many communities avoided unnecessary comfort as part of their beliefs. Yet simplicity did not mean ignoring the cold. People still needed warmth. People still needed rest. People still needed protection from winter. Even those devoted to spiritual practices remained human. You imagine someone lying down after a long day of work and prayer. Their body feels tired, their hands have touched cold surfaces, their clothing carries the scent of the places they have worked. The need for sleep connects everyone. A noble, a servant, a soldier, a religious person. Winter creates the same physical challenge for all. You walk slowly through the quiet space and notice the importance of routine. Medieval people often experienced time differently from modern people. The rhythm of the day was connected to sunlight, seasons, religious practices, and community activities. Night was not simply an empty space between yesterday and tomorrow. It had meaning. A curious detail from medieval religious life is that some communities practiced forms of nighttime prayer or waking periods because they believed certain hours of darkness were especially meaningful for reflection and devotion. The night could be a time of stillness, a time of connection, a time to think. You pause beside a small candle and watch the flame move gently. The light creates a warm circle against the cold darkness. It reminds you of the fires throughout the castle. Different places, different purposes, the same human desire for comfort. Historians still debate how closely religious routines influenced ordinary castle residents, because medieval society was deeply connected but varied greatly by region and social group. Some people followed religious schedules closely, while others experienced nighttime through more practical concerns. The castle contained many different beliefs and habits. You leave the quiet chamber and think about the relationship between sleep and faith. In a world where darkness lasted many hours during winter, people naturally searched for the ways to understand it. Stories, prayers, traditions, these helped give meaning to the long night. You imagine a medieval person looking out from a window during a winter evening. The landscape is dark, the roads are hidden, the fields are frozen, the world feels enormous. Yet the routines inside the castle create order. The fire burns at the expected time, the meals happen at the expected time, the prayers happen at the expected time, the sleeping hours arrive with familiar patterns. Human beings have always created structure in uncertain environments. You return to the corridor and hear the castle around you again. The distant guard, the movement of servants, the quiet breathing of sleeping families. All these sounds exist together. The castle is not only a military structure, it is a community. And every community develops its own relationship with darkness. You walk toward another room where the meaning of night becomes even more mysterious. While some people saw sleep as a necessary rest, and others saw it as a spiritual moment, everyone wondered about the strange world that appeared when the eyes closed. The world of dreams. The medieval night was filled with questions. What did dreams mean? Why did people experience them? Could they reveal hidden messages? You enter the next part of the castle where these ideas quietly waited beside the sleeping people of 1478. You continue through the sleeping castle, moving away from the quiet religious chamber and toward the rooms where people are resting beneath heavy blankets. The night has reached its deepest calm. The fires have become smaller. The storm outside has slowed, but the cold remains pressed against the walls. Inside these dark rooms, people are not only escaping winter, they are entering another world, the world of dreams. You stand beside a sleeping area and listen to the quiet breathing around you. The sound is gentle and steady. A person asleep in a medieval castle would have experienced the same mysterious transition that people experience today. The body rests, the mind wanders, and strange images appear. For medieval people, however, dreams often carried deeper meanings. Sleep was not simply a biological process. It was connected with beliefs, stories, fears, and hopes. A dream could be seen as a message, a warning, a reflection of daily life, or simply a strange experience of the sleeping mind. You look around the room and imagine the thoughts that followed people into sleep. A farmer might dream about the harvest. A soldier might dream about distant battles. A child might dream about the stories heard near the fire. A noble might dream about Emily, power, or the future. The mind carried the experiences of the day into the darkness of night. The first thing you notice is the atmosphere. The room is still. The only movement comes from the shifting of blankets and the occasional sound of the castle settling. The smell of wool, smoke, and cold stone surrounds the sleepers. This quiet environment creates a perfect space for imagination. A mainstream historical fact is that medieval European writings often included discussions of dreams, visions, and their possible meanings. Religious and philosophical traditions influenced how many people understood experiences during sleep. Dreams were taken seriously, but they were also mysterious. You imagine someone waking briefly in the middle of the night after a strange dream. The candle is almost gone. The room is dark. The winter storm continues outside. What would they think? Would they ignore it? Would they remember it in the morning? Would they search for meaning? These questions have followed humans throughout history. A curious detail from medieval beliefs is that some people associated certain dreams with health, morality, or future events. These interpretations varied widely, and different communities developed their own ideas about what dreams might represent. The sleeping mind became a place where ordinary life and imagination met. You walk through the corridor and notice how darkness changes the castle. During the day, stone walls represent strength. At night, those same walls create shadows and mystery. The same place can feel completely different depending on the hour. A room filled with sunlight becomes a room of secrets after midnight. A familiar hallway becomes a place where every sound matters. A simple dream becomes a question. You pause near a window and look into the darkness outside. The stars are hidden by clouds. The snow reflects faint traces of moonlight. The world beyond the castle feels distant. Inside, people sleep close together. Their dreams are private. Their fears are personal. Yet the environment surrounding them is shared. Historians still debate how ordinary medieval people personally understood dreams because most surviving dream records come from educated writers, religious figures, or wealthy individuals rather than everyday workers. The voices of ordinary sleepers are harder to find, but their dreams existed. They woke from them. They remembered them. They wondered about them. You return to the sleeping chamber and notice the contrast between imagination and reality. The mind may travel anywhere during sleep, but the body remains connected to the physical world. The cold blanket, the wooden bed, the stone room, the winter air, these things remain. A person dreaming of summer warmth may still wake to a frozen morning. A person dreaming of distant lands may still open their eyes inside the same castle walls. Sleep creates a temporary escape, but morning always returns. You think about the people resting here in 1478. They are not only surviving winter, they are creating memories. The nights they spend inside these rooms become part of their understanding of life. A long winter night teaches patience. It teaches adaptation. It teaches people to find comfort in small moments. The warmth of another person nearby, the glow of a candle, the sound of familiar voices, the safety of a locked door. These simple things become meaningful. You leave the sleeping chambers and continue through the fortress. The castle is almost completely still now. The guards remain awake. The fires continue burning. Everyone else has entered the quiet world of rest. But there is one part of the night you have not yet fully experienced. The deepest hours before dawn. The time when the temperature falls. The darkness feels endless, and even the strongest walls must face the coldest part of winter. You move toward the final stretch of the night. The castle waits, the wind returns, and the frozen hours approach. You remain inside the castle as the night reaches its coldest point. The hours before dawn are often the hardest. The fires have burned lower. The warmth gathered during the evening has slowly faded. The people who are awake feel the weight of the darkness, while those sleeping depend on every preparation made earlier. Outside, winter surrounds the fortress. Inside, everyone waits for morning. You walk through the quiet corridors and notice how different the castle feels now compared with the evening. Earlier, there were voices, footsteps, and movement everywhere. Now, the building seems to have settled into a slower rhythm. The first thing you notice is the temperature. The air feels heavier. The stone feels colder. The rooms that were comfortable several hours ago have changed. Medieval castles stood cold as easily as they stored heat. And during a long winter night, that cold slowly returned. You pass the great hall where the fires become a bed of glowing embers. The room is no longer filled with conversation. The tables sit empty. The shadows stretch across the floor. Yet the hall still carries signs of life. A forgotten cup. A folded cloth. A mark left by yesterday's activities. The castle remembers the people who moved through it. You continue toward the sleeping chambers and listen carefully. The sounds are softer now. Breathing. Occasional movement. The quiet sounds of people adjusting blankets or changing positions to find a little more comfort. Sleep during this part of the night requires patience. The body wants warmth. The room provides only what it can. You imagine lying beneath a heavy blanket, feeling the cold air touch your face while the rest of your body remains protected. The small details become important. The position of the bed, the thickness of the covering, the location of the room. A few steps closer to the fireplace could make a difference. A blocked draught could make a difference. A thicker layer beneath the body could make a difference. Medieval survival often depended on these small choices. A mainstream historical fact is that many medieval buildings used thick walls and shutters to reduce exposure to harsh weather. although these methods could not completely eliminate cold temperatures inside stone structures. Protection was not perfection. The castle reduced the danger of winter. It did not remove winter. You move toward a narrow window and see the darkness outside. The snow has covered the landscape, and the castle towers stand against the frozen ski. The world beyond the walls feels distant and quiet. This is the hour when imagination can become powerful. A storm outside, a dark hallway, a flickering candle, a strange sound in the distance. The medieval night was filled with moments that encouraged stories and beliefs. A curious detail from medieval life is that people often used household routines and traditions to make uncertain moments feel more predictable. Preparing clothing, arranging bedding, and checking fires before sleep created a sense of control during difficult seasons. You return to the interior rooms and notice that even the smallest actions from earlier have shaped this moment. The servant who added firewood, the person who prepared the blankets, the guard who watched the walls, the cook who stored the supplies, all of them contributed to this quiet hour. Sleep inside the castle is a shared achievement. No single person creates comfort alone. Historians still debate how severe winter conditions inside medieval castles were compared with popular descriptions. Because buildings differed greatly and written sources rarely recorded ordinary nighttime temperatures, some fortresses may have offered more protection than expected, while others likely felt extremely harsh during severe weather. The truth depends on the place, the weather, the people. You walk slowly through the castle and imagine everyone sleeping at the same moment. The noble family rests behind a wooden door. Servants sleep in shared spaces. Soldiers wait for the end of their watch. Children dream beneath layers of cloth. Different lives. One winter night. The same desire for morning. You stop near a small fire that is still burning. The warmth is gentle now, not powerful. The flames no longer fill the room with energy. They simply continue their quiet duty. There is something peaceful about this. The fire does not need to defeat the winter. It only needs to continue. The people inside the castle understand this feeling. They are not expecting perfect comfort. They are creating enough comfort to rest. You sit beside the fading flames and listen. The wind outside, the fire inside, the slow movement of the sleeping fortress. The sounds blend together. The night feels long, but it is passing. Soon, the sky will begin to change. The darkness will slowly weaken. The first signs of morning will appear beyond the walls. But before that happens, the castle must endure these final hours. The deepest cold, the quietest moments, the time when everyone waits for the return of light. You look around the fortress and realize something important. Medieval winter night was not only a story of hardship, it was also a story of cooperation. People adapted. They prepared. They cared for one another. They created warmth from limited resources. The frozen world outside was powerful, but the people inside the castle were not helpless. Their knowledge, traditions, and shared efforts allowed them to survive season after season. The night continues for a little longer. The fires remain. The walls stand. The sleepers rest. And slowly, very slowly, the first promise of dawn begins approaching the frozen castle. The first signs of morning begin to appear beyond the castle walls. The darkness that covered the fortress for so many hours slowly begins to soften. The winter sky remains grey and cold, but the deepest part of the night has finally passed. You stand inside the castle and notice the change immediately. The building is waking, not quickly, not suddenly, slowly. The first sounds return one by one. A door opens, footsteps move across the floor, someone adds wood to a fire, a voice speaks quietly in the distance. The castle is coming back to life. After a frozen night, morning is not simply the beginning of another day, it is a moment of renewal. Every person inside the fortress must leave the warmth of sleep and return to their responsibilities. You walk through the corridors and feel the cold morning air. The room that held people safely during the night now prepare them for activity. Blankets are folded, clothing is collected, fires are strengthened. The first thing you notice is the smell. The scent of fresh smoke returns as fireplaces are revived. The smell of warm food begins drifting from the kitchen. The familiar combination of wood, ash, and stone tells you that another winter day has begun. You enter a sleeping chamber and see the signs of the night that has passed. Bedding is disturbed. Candles have burned away. Personal items wait beside sleeping areas. The room tells a quiet story. People were here. People rested here. People survived another cold night. A mainstream historical fact is that medieval households followed seasonal rhythms closely, with winter affecting daily schedules, travel, work patterns, and the use of resources. Shorter daylight hours changed how people organized their activities. Morning arrived differently in winter. There was less light, less heels, less warmth, less time for outdoor tasks. You watch as people prepare themselves. Clothing is an important part of the process. Person does not simply step out of bed and begin the day comfortably. Layers must be arranged. Warm materials must be gathered. The body remembers the cold. The room remembers the cold. Winter follows people from sleep into waking life. You move towards the Great Hall and see activity returning. Servants begin their duties. Tables are prepared. The fire grows stronger. The castle slowly returns to the rhythm it had before the night began. The same people who searched for warmth hours earlier now create the conditions for another day. The servant who maintained the fire begins working again. The guard who watched the walls prepares to rest. The cook begins preparing food. The noble household starts making decisions. Every person has a place within the castle. You think back to the frozen evening when you first entered the fortress. The castle seemed like a cold and intimidating structure. Now you see something different. It is a carefully connected community. The walls protect it, but the people make it function. A curious detail from medieval life is that mornings often involve checking and caring for items used during the night. Bedding, clothing, fires, and supplies required regular attention because materials were valuable and maintenance extended their usefulness. Nothing was casually replaced. Everything was cared for. You look outside through a window and see the winter landscape again. Snow covers the ground, smoke rises from the castle roof, the world remains cold, but the people inside are already adapting. Historians still debate how closely castle routines matched ideal description found in medieval records, because written sources often present organized household systems rather than the messy reality of daily life. Real mornings likely varied depending on wealth, location, and circumstances. But one thing remains clear. Morning required effort. You leave the window and follow the sounds of activity. The castle no longer feels like a sleeping place. It has become a workplace again. The night has ended. The fires have survived. The people have rested. The winter day begins. You pause for a moment and think about the experience of sleeping here. It was not defined by luxury or complete comfort. It was defined by adaptation. The people of 1478 understood their environment. They knew where warmth could be found. They knew how to prepare. They knew how to make difficult conditions manageable. Their methods may seem unfamiliar today, but the goal was the same. A safe night. A rested body. A new morning. You walk through the castle one final time as daylight grows stronger. The rooms that have felt mysterious during the night now appear ordinary again. The shadows disappear. The walls return to their daytime appearance. But you remember what happened here after sunset. The quiet conversation. The careful preparation. The fires. The blankets. The people who stayed awake. The people who finally slept. A frozen medieval night was not just a test of endurance. It was a demonstration of human creativity. Before modern heating, people created warmth through cooperation and knowledge. Before modern comfort, they built routines that protected them. Before the conveniences of today, they found ways to make winter survivable. The castle stands exactly where it did before, The snow remains, the stone remains, but the people inside have changed the meaning of this place. It is no longer only a fortress, it is a home, and every home, no matter how old, is shaped by the people who wake inside it. The morning continues, the fires burn brighter, the castle begins another day. You remain inside the castle as the morning slowly settles into another winter day. The night of frozen darkness has passed, but the lessons of that night remain visible everywhere around you. The castle is awake again. Footsteps cross the stone floors. Fires are rebuilt. Voices return to the halls. The quiet world of sleeping has transformed back into the busy world of working. You walk through the rooms you visited during the night and see them differently now. In the evening, they were places of preparation during the deepest hours. They became shelters. Now, they reveal something larger. They show how people lived. Sleeping in a medieval castle was never separated from the rest of life. It was connected to work, family, social position, weather, and the resources available around them. A person's sleeping place reflected their entire world. You pass through the Great Hall again and notice how ordinary it appears in daylight. The same room that held warmth and conversation last night is now a place of activity. Tables are prepared. Servants move through the space. The fireplace burns strongly once more. The hall was never only a sleeping area. It was never only a dining room. It was the centre of community life. This is one of the most important things to understand about medieval castles. They were not frozen monuments waiting for history to happen. They were living environments filled with routines, relationships, and daily challenges. You continue through the castle and think about the many different people who slept here. The noble family had private chambers, but they still depended on servants. The servants had simpler spaces, but they maintained the entire household. The soldiers faced the cold directly, but their watch protected everyone. The children slept safely because others prepared the castle around them. Every person had a different experience, yet every person contributed to the survival of the whole. A mainstream historical fact is that medieval castles functioned as administrative centres where households managed land, supplies, workers, and military responsibilities. The castle was not only a residence, but also an organised system. You look at the walls around you and realise that the stone structure was only part of the story. The real protection came from knowledge. People knew how to store food. They knew how to preserve warmth. They knew how to prepare clothing. They knew how to manage winter. Without these skills, even the strongest castle would have been difficult to live in. You enter a storage area and see supplies arranged carefully. Winter requires planning because resources collected before the cold months determine how comfortable life can become. Firewood, food, fabric, tools, everything has a place. The people of 1478 lived in a world where replacement was not simple. A damaged blanket could not always be quickly replaced. A wasted supply could create problems later. Maintenance was part of survival. A curious detail from medieval household life is that many objects were repaired repeatedly rather than discarded, because materials required significant labour and expense. Clothing, furniture, and household items often had much longer lives than many modern objects. You touch an old wooden surface and imagine how many hands have used it. How many winters has this castle experienced? How many mornings have people woken here? How many times have fires been rebuilt after long nights of cold? The castle contains layers of memory. Historians still debate how much everyday life inside castles resemble the organised descriptions found in surviving records. Because written sources often focus on ideal household arrangements rather than ordinary moments of confusion, exhaustion, or improvisation. Real life was likely less perfect, but it was also more human. People adjusted. They solved problems. They created comfort where they could. You walk toward the upper levels and remember the noble chamber from the previous night. It represented wealth, but it also showed something important. Even privilege had limits. A wealthy person could own better bedding. A wealthy person could have more servants. A wealthy person could control more resources. But winter still arrived. Cold stone still remained cold. Fire still required care. Sleep still required preparation. Nature created a shared experience that crossed your boundaries. You look outside from the castle window and see the surrounding landscape. The fields remain frozen. The roads are difficult. The season continues. Yet inside the fortress, life continues as well. This balance between hardship and adaptation defines medieval winter. It was not a constant disaster. It was not effortless comfort. It was a daily negotiation. You think about the sleeping habits of the people who lived here. Their beds, blankets, fires, and routines were shaped by the world around them. They did not have the technology available today, but they had knowledge built through generations. They understood their environment. They understood materials. They understood cooperation. The winter night that seemed so harsh became manageable because hundreds of small actions came together. Someone closed a shutter. Someone repaired a blanket. Someone carried wood. Someone prepared food. Someone stood watch. Someone told a child that the storm would pass. These moments created the experience of home. You leave the busy areas and return briefly to a quiet corridor. The castle feels peaceful again, not because it is empty, but because it is balanced. People are working. Fires are burning. The day has begun. You now see the frozen castle differently. It is not only a cold stone fortress, it is a place where people created warmth through patience and cooperation. The walls protected them from the outside world, but their traditions protected them from the inside challenges of winter. And as you continue deeper into the history of this castle, another truth begins to appear. The medieval world was not only about surviving difficult conditions, it was also about finding small comfort hidden within them. You continue through the castle during the quiet hours of the day, carrying with you the memory of the frozen night that has just passed. The fortress no longer feels like a place of endless hardship. Instead, you begin noticing the small comforts hidden within its walls. They are not the comforts of modern life. There are no heated floors, no bright lights, no effortless warmth, but comfort has never existed in only one form. You walk through a chamber where blankets are being folded and clothing is being arranged. The room appears simple, yet every object has been chosen carefully. A thick fabric, a wooden chest, a small fire, a protected corner away from the strongest drafts. These details reveal something important. Medieval people were not simply enduring winter. They were designing ways to live with it. The first thing you notice is the craftsmanship around you. The materials are natural, but they are not crude. Wool has been carefully prepared. Wood has been shaped by skilled hands. Metal objects have been created for specific purposes. Every item represents time and effort. A mainstream historical fact is that medieval craftspeople developed specialized skills in producing textiles, furniture, tools, and household goods. These crafts were essential because daily comfort depended heavily on handmade objects. You look at a heavy blanket and imagine the journey behind it. The wool had to be collected. The fibers had to be processed. The material had to be woven. The finished blanket had to be maintained. Warmth was created long before someone used it at night. You continue through another room and notice how people use space intelligently. A castle could not simply expand whenever more comfort was needed. Every area had to serve a purpose. A room could be a workplace during the day and a resting area at night. A corner near a fire could become the most valuable place in winter. A hallway could connect not only rooms but entire communities. Medieval people adapted their surroundings instead of expecting their surroundings to adapt to them. A curious detail from medieval homes is that some households used decorative fabrics and wall hangings, not only for appearance but also because layers of material could help reduce drafts and improve comfort in colder rooms. Beauty and practicality often existed together. You enter a room where a small fire burns near the wall. The flames are modest, but the atmosphere feels welcoming. A person sitting here would experience something simple but meaningful. warm hands, a place to rest, a moment of peace. These things mattered. You think about the winter night again. The castle was cold, but it was never empty of solutions. People carried knowledge from one generation to the next. They understood what materials helped. They understood where warmth gathered. They understood how to prepare. Historians still debate how comfortable medieval castles could truly become during severe winters because popular images often exaggerate either extreme luxury or complete misery. Evidence suggests a much more complicated reality, with some spaces offering reasonable comfort while others remain challenging. The truth exists between those extremes. You continue walking and notice small signs of personal life. A carved wooden object, a repaired piece of fabric, a carefully stored possession. These objects remind you that the people here were not only survivors, they were individuals. They had preferences. They had memories. They had things they valued. The castle was a place of duty, but it was also a place of ordinary human moments. Someone laughing near the fire, someone telling a story before sleep, someone enjoying a warm meal after a difficult day, someone feeling relief when a storm finally passed. These moments rarely appear in dramatic histories, but they shaped everyday life. You look through a window and see sunlight reflecting on the snow. The landscape remains frozen, but the view is peaceful. Winter was not only an enemy, it was also part of the rhythm of life. People marked seasons. They adjusted their routines. They found meaning in familiar patterns. The arrival of cold weather changed everything, but it also created traditions. Long evenings, shared meals, indoor crafts, stories near the stangve, quiet conversations before sleep. A winter night inside a castle could be difficult, but it could also be deeply human. You return to the sleeping areas and notice how much thought went into creating rest. The bed was not just a wooden frame. The blanket was not just fabric. The fire was not just burning wood. Together, they created a small protected world, a place where the body could recover, a place where the mind could relax, a place where tomorrow could begin. The castle no longer appears as a cold monument from the past. It appears as a home shaped by necessity, a home shaped by creativity, a home shaped by generations of people who understood that comfort does not always require abundance. Sometimes, comfort comes from knowing how to use what you have. You walk through the corridor one final time and listen to the sounds of the living fortress. The footsteps, the voices, the fire, the movement of daily work. The castle is not frozen in time. In time, it is continuing, and the people inside are continuing with it. The winter night has revealed more than sleeping habits. It has revealed a way of life, a way built around patience, preparation, and the quiet belief that even the coldest nights can be survived. You walk slowly through the castle one final time, now familiar with the paths that once seemed dark and unfamiliar. The frozen night that welcomed you at the beginning has become a collection of memories. The stone corridors, the fireplaces, the sleeping chambers, and the quiet corners all tell the story of the people who lived here. The castle feels different now, not warmer, not softer, but more understandable. You no longer see only the cold walls and narrow windows, you see the countless small actions that allowed people to live within them. Every fire that was maintained, every blanket that was repaired, every meal that was prepared, every door that was secured before sleep. All of these moments created the experience of winter life in 1478. You stop near the Great Hall and look around. The room is busy again, but you can still imagine the night version of this place. The tables covered with food, the fading conversations, the servants preparing the final details before everyone disappeared into darkness. The Great Hall was not only a room, it was a meeting place for human experiences. People arrived here with different responsibilities, different worries, and different hopes, yet during a winter evening, they shared the same basic needs: warmth, food, safety, rest. A mainstream historical fact is that medieval castles depended on large households where many different roles worked together to maintain daily life. The success of a castle relied not only on the noble family, but also on servants, craftsmen, guards, and workers. You walk toward the fireplace and watch the flames move gently. The fire is smaller than it was the night before, but it still represents the same idea: care. A fire survives because someone protects it. A household survives because someone maintains it. A community survives because people depend on one another. You think about the servants who worked while others slept. Their names may never have been recorded. Their personal stories may have disappeared centuries ago, yet their actions shape the lives of everyone inside the castle. History often remembers the powerful, but ordinary people create the daily world around them. You imagine the servant carrying firewood through the cold hallway. You imagine the guard walking across the frozen battlements. You imagine the person arranging blankets before a child went to sleep. Small actions, large meaning. The winter night was not conquered by one great invention or one heroic moment. It was managed through thousands of ordinary decisions. You leave the hall and return toward the sleeping chambers. The rooms are quiet now. The blankets have been folded. The beds are prepared for another night. The same routines will begin again when darkness returns. This repetition was part of medieval life. The seasons changed. The weather changed. But many daily rhythms remained. A curious detail from medieval household life is that personal belongings were often limited compared with modern standards, meaning people frequently developed strong relationships with the few objects they owned. A blanket, a tool, or a piece of clothing could carry practical and emotional importance. You enter a small chamber and notice a repaired fabric hanging near the wall. It is not perfect. The stitches are visible. The material has clearly been used many times, yet someone cared enough to repair it. That simple object represents a different relationship with possessions. Things were valued because they required effort. They carried history. They carried memory. You place your hand against the cold stone wall and think about how many people have touched the same surface. Generations have walked these corridors. Generations have experienced winter storms. Generations have searched for warmth inside these walls. Historians still debate how accurately modern interpretations capture the emotional experience of medieval people. Because historical records can describe actions and objects more easily than feelings, we know what people used, but we cannot fully know every thought they carried into sleep. Still, some experiences are easy to understand. The comfort of a warm fire, the relief of a safe shelter, the tiredness after a long day, the peaceful moment before sleep. These feelings connect people across centuries. You continue toward the upper levels and look out over the frozen landscape. The snow-covered fields appear quiet and endless. The castle stands above them, strong but not untouched by nature. The winter remains powerful. The cold remains real. But the people inside have learned how to live with it. They do not ignore the season. They respect it. They prepare for it. They adapt to it. This may be the greatest lesson from the frozen castle. Survival is not always about defeating challenges. Sometimes it is about understanding them. The people of 1478 understood winter better than we often imagine. They knew which rooms offered protection. They knew how to preserve warmth. They knew the importance of preparation. They knew that comfort came from many small choices working together. You return to the corridor where your journey through the castle began. The same walls surround you. The same winter air moves outside. But the castle has changed. Or perhaps you have changed. At first, the fortress seemed like a cold and distant place. Now it feels like a home filled with human stories. A place where people laughed. A place where people worked. A place where people dreamed. A place where people slept through long winter nights. The castle remains silent for a moment. The candles flicker. The fires continue. The winter wind moves beyond the walls. And somewhere inside this ancient fortress, another night is beginning. Another group of people will prepare their beds. Another fire will be built. Another frozen evening will be faced. Because history is not only made by great events, it is also made by quiet nights, by ordinary people, by the simple act of finding warmth in a cold world. You return once more to the frozen castle as evening begins to arrive again. The winter sky darkens above the towers, and the first candles begin to appear behind narrow windows. The fortress is preparing for another night, just as it has done countless times before. You stand quietly in the courtyard and listen. The wind moves across the walls, footsteps cross the stone paths. A fire begins to crackle inside. The castle is returning to the same familiar rhythm you witnessed before. The day fades away, and the fortress slowly transforms from a place of work into a place of rest. The people inside already know what must be done. The wood must be prepared. The rooms must be checked. The blankets must be arranged. The doors must be secured. Winter does not surprise them anymore. It is an old companion. You enter through the heavy doorway and feel the difference between the outside world and the sheltered interior. The air is still cold, but there is movement everywhere. Servants carry supplies. Workers complete final tasks. Families begin gathering before sleep. The great hall glows once again. The fire burns. The shadows move. The familiar sounds return. You remember your first arrival at the castle, when the stone walls seemed harsh and unwelcoming. Now you understand what they represent. They are not simply barriers against the weather. They are spaces shaped by human effort. Every room has a story. Every corner has a purpose. Every sleeping place reveals something about the people who used it. You walk through the hall and notice the small details that once seemed ordinary. A stack of firewood waiting nearby. A folded blanket placed carefully on a bench. A pair of boots drying near the warmth. These objects are simple, but they contain the history of survival. A mainstream historical fact is that medieval castles required constant maintenance because their size, materials, and daily activities demanded regular care. Keeping a castle functional was a continuous responsibility shared by many people. You continue toward the sleeping chambers and see the preparations beginning again. The noble family retreats towards more private rooms. Servants organize shared spaces. Guards prepare for another watch. The same pattern repeats, but repetition does not make it meaningless. For the people living here, these routines created security. They created familiarity. They created home. You pause beside a window and look outside. Snow begins falling again, covering the landscape in a quiet layer of white. The storm does not feel as threatening now. You know what exists inside the walls. The fires, the blankets, the people, the knowledge passed from one generation to another. A curious detail from medieval life is that seasonal routines were deeply connected to community memory. People learned how to handle winter through traditions passed between parents, workers, and neighbours, creating practical knowledge that shaped everyday life. You think about all the nights before this one, all the winters a year before 1478, all the people who discovered their own ways to rest through the cold months. Some slept beside great fires, some slept in simple rooms, some stood awake while others rested, some told stories before closing their eyes. Yet all of them shared the same experience of night arriving. Historians still debate many details about medieval sleeping habits because evidence from ordinary people is limited and often incomplete. Written records preserve some information about wealthy households and religious communities, but the quiet experiences of many workers remain hidden. Still, the castle itself provides clues. The beds, the fireplaces, the rooms, the objects left behind. They show a world where sleep was shaped by environment and community. You return to the great hall one final time. The fire creates a soft glow across the stone walls. Outside, the winter night continues. Inside, people prepare to rest. The castle is no longer a mystery. It is a place of human resilience, a place where people accepted the challenges around them and created comfort through patience. The night grows deeper. The voices become quieter. The candles burn lower. Soon, the castle will settle into darkness. Oh, it's so quiet once again. The guards will continue walking. The fires will continue glowing. The sleepers will pull their blankets closer, and the winter wind will move around the ancient walls. But tonight, you understand something that is easier to forget. Comfort does not always come from having everything. Sometimes it comes from knowing how to use what you have. A warm fire, a safe room, a familiar voice, a blanket shared with someone nearby. These small things carried great meaning in the frozen winters of the medieval world. Now you leave the castle slowly, walking back through the corridors one final time. The stones beneath your feet are quiet. The candles flicker gently. The fortress rests around you like a sleeping giant. The storm outside fades into the distance. The walls grow softer in the darkness. The last sounds become much smaller. The fire continues its gentle rhythm. The castle remains standing beneath the winter sky, holding the memories of everyone who once searched for warmth within its walls. And as the night deepens, you can imagine the people of 1478 finally resting peacefully, protected by the simple comforts they created. The frozen world waits outside, but inside there is warmth, there is safety, there is rest. The candlelight slowly fades. The sounds become quieter. The winter night settles into peaceful scent. You no longer stand inside the cold castle. You're only drifting through the memory of it. The stone walls disappear. The wind becomes softer. The fire becomes a distant glow. The long winter night has passed, leaving only a gentle feeling of calm behind. Rest now. Let the old castle grow quiet. Let the snow fall softly beyond the walls. Let the warmth of the fire remain as a final image from a distant age. And as the medieval fortress sleeps beneath the winter sky, you can finally allow yourself to sleep too.